feel rough. And I'm going to do some quick and easy environmental effects. One could say I'm under the weathering. Weathering looks great. Nothing sells a science fiction or fantasy environment like the appearance of a lived-in universe. However, weathering can be intimidating. You've just painted something up and are scared about ruining it, or you have no idea where to start. Well, I'm going to show you a few quick and easy techniques that I use on Armour, so hopefully it can give you some ideas to try out. First off, I have a Deathwing Terminator Ancient, or Standard Bearer as we knew them back in the day. Now, Terminators are big in this new edition, so this seems like a great place to start. They have lots of armour panels. One of the simplest techniques is stippling to create a scratch or chip effect on the armour. Because this is a relatively small model, I'm going to do this with a rather stiff brush. Brushes wear out over time, but that doesn't stop them being useful. With this old one, I have trimmed the bristles back unevenly to create random patterns. Rather than loading the brush with paint, I take the tiniest speck of it onto the brush and then wipe off any excess. Not quite enough as for dry brushing, but close. In this instance, I am using Dryad bark. I lightly touch it to the areas I want to appear damaged, in this case the pauldrons and some of the other panels. I then repeat this step with Stormhost Silver over the same area. This gives the impression of different depths of scratches. Remember, if the effect is too subtle, you can come back in and add more, but be careful, it's easy to add too much. For the claws, I'm going to do a weathered metal effect. Since these conduct power, I want to make them look aged and discoloured. This effect also works on gun muzzles, as you can see on my Contemptor Dreadnought's multi-melter. For this, I glaze the blades with Guilliman flesh. Then the halves towards the tips get a glaze of Magos purple. Then the final quarters get a glaze of Guilliman blue glaze. But since this glaze is out of production, you can substitute it with Talisar blue. When it comes to gore, less is more. Blood for the Blood God is great. It has the right colour and texture to look like scaled blood. On a darker miniature, you can go a little heavier, but it stands out much more on lighter panels. So a couple of light dabs where it would normally spray in combat is all you need. In my previous video for the channel, I painted up the Ballista's Dreadnought from the new Leviathan set. I went for a pretty clean paint job, but now it's time to give it a little extra flavour. As it is a larger model, I am going to be using a roughly torn up piece of sponge in a pair of tweezers. I am less likely to catch it on anything I don't want to. Because this is a mix of dark armour and light panels, I use a dark brown where the panels are light and a light brown where the panels are dark. I then give both areas the same treatment with Stormhost Silver. I have these pigment powders here. They are from Vallejo, but you can make your own by just grabbing some cheap coloured chalk and grinding them up. For this, I am taking the darkest of the pigments and brushing it around areas where soot and grime will gather, around exhausts, gun muzzles, etc. The effect can be very subtle, so add more if you want it to be more overt. In areas where the grime should look set in, cover the area, in this case some pipes and joins, and then dip some fixer, medium or even a little water with a pipette over the area, and the pigments will run into the recesses. I don't want to go too heavy as this is a new unit and thus shouldn't have really had time to gather too many dings and scrapes. This armoured sentinel, on the other hand, is definitely old and dinged up. Let's go to town. To start, I am using Typhus Corrosion. This is a technical paint from Citadel. It has a gritty texture, so use a sponge or old brush because it's going to quickly bugger up a good brush. I apply dabs of it around joints and sharp edges where the paint naturally would wear away and the environment gets in. When dry, I grab Riser Rust, but any bright orange will do. I give the areas with the Typhus Corrosion a very light dry brushing with the Riser Rust. It catches on those gritty areas and looks really realistic at this scale. Panel liners are great for vehicles, but despite their name, they can do more than just panel lining. If you find the idea of mixing up an oil wash intimidating, you can get a similar effect with enamels. Browns and blacks look great where oil would gather and stain, whilst the light grey adds a nice, slightly foggy glaze to any glass or lenses. Since this Sentinel is for my as yet unpainted Valhallans, it needs some snow. Normally I just go over the base for snow, but this Sentinel will have picked up some snowfall, thus I put some on the flat and horizontal areas of the model. With a wet brush, I dab the edges of the snow to make it look a little bit slushier. So here's a big model now, the original Forge World Spartan. This beast is the weight of a house brick. It's looking all clean and shiny, and we can't have that. Let's take some of the techniques we've looked at and scale them up. I look around the model for where the paint chipping would happen, namely around the edges of the doors and the ramp, and I do the chipping techniques. I lightly sponge Typhus Corrosion on the tracks and in little splashes around the bottom of the vehicle, where grime would be walked in through the hatches. Panel lining around the grates and armour recesses looks nicely grimy and adds a bit more contrast. And pigment powder around the exhausts and weapons looks pretty sweet. So that was some quick and easy weathering techniques that I go to a lot. If you liked this video, please hit those little buttons that tell the YouTube that we make good stuff. It really helps us out. I will now leave you with some beauty shots of the finished products, and I will catch you next time on Bleeding Tree Gaming.